And once again, our FZR restoration has to deal with some very unpredictable weather. One weather channel says no chance of rain at all. The other one says it's going to rain. But we're used to dealing with this inconsistent weather pattern, and the show must go on. And I always say bad weather can slow you down, but it can't stop you. At every one of these restorations we have dealt with crazy weather, and I think to a certain degree we've dealt with it well. So looking at these gray clouds ahead over above us, I'm just not so sure we're going to get anything painted today. But we always are used to working around it. So in the last couple days, everything's been drying up under the heating vent. And I always, as I've learned and reinforced in my mind, letting things dry an extra day or two just makes the sanding and buffing that much easier. So what I decided to do today, because the weather looks so unpredictable, I ran out early, I mixed up one batch of clear, and this is the part right around the FZR. I don't know, it picked up dirt or dust or something. There's a lot of little imperfections around that decal. So what I did, just to make this easier to work on later, and I don't want to take a chance on sanding down through into the decal, I put another coat of clear on the whole part. And that'll dry a day or two before we ever work on that part again. These parts we already have buffed, and boy, when that paint was a couple of days old, a week old, buffing it out was just as easy as anything I've ever buffed out, that's for sure. So again, part of the thing I'm trying to do is not rush this. Everything on this project table is really right under a heating vent. So an extra day of drying is always to our advantage. And that's especially true where these paint lines are and where the decals are, because where they are, there's going to be extra clear. And I would not want to be sanding and on this first coat of clear and bust through into a decal. So sanding these parts the first time they get sanded, you just want to do a light sanding. Not take a chance and go through and tear up a decal. Now, as I'm having my coffee here, it's always nice to look back at some of our old track day pictures. This is one of Luciano's Suzuki's that I got to ride this a couple times. A really nice track bike. This was another day. He had his 250 here, and he was just smoking all the four-strokes with that TZ. Now, it's funny, when you sell a bike that you've had for quite a long time, and I don't sell any bikes, that's the problem. They all wind up in my collection. But I know you miss it years later. But at least in my case, we have always taken a lot of photos, and they're always fun to look back on. They always get me started, get a day started on the right foot. See the blue tape on the top of the tank? I never liked that. I just didn't like that at all. That's why I put that little decal on the tank. Makes me legal. And as many times as I look at these old photos and these old days that we were doing this and we were having such great times. We actually had a lot of fun on the ride to and from the track day. Even a day when Luciano's trailer got a flat. Always a good time. Yeah, I do remember this Suzuki as being a really good track bike. I don't even remember who he sold this bike to. And if you've never done any track days, I think you've missed one of life's great adventures. And a track day with Luciano is always an adventure. And this is how I start off my morning, trying to get some inspiration to go do some very high quality paint work. And these pictures always inspire me. And I know when Luciano sees these pictures, he's going to be so sorry he sold that TZ. He should have sold it to me. Just a lot of good memories. And hey, I'm ready to go do some paint work. Coffee and some TZ 250 pictures. What a way to start the day. So I'm trying to sequence out a day that I don't know how much time I'm really going to have in the overall scheme of things. And the weather is tentative, so I'm going to try to at least use the day, get some of the sanding done. We're going to do it with Mirka 1200, wet and dry. And that paint now is basically 3 or 4 days old. It's been sitting up by a heating vent a couple of those days. That paint should be ready to sand. Now once paint is cured, there's a way to determine if it's cured. If you live in a warm weather climate, it'll be cured, believe me, a lot quicker. But what's going to happen is that it's always going to tell you if it's cured. Find a little stripe, go against the grain. This is my test anyway. When I have a part, this part is almost all taped and striped. Go back in a 45 and 90 degree. Just do your little sanding thing in one small area. Because if this paint is not cured yet, no point going on. Now, absolutely no chewing gum on the sandpaper. When that sandpaper is clean and I can wipe this dry. Now where people get in the most, they make more work than it has to be. You make the work when you're trying to rush this and the paint isn't fully cured. What's going to happen in a warm weather climate? That's not going to be as common as when people are doing this where we are here. I'd say the average temperature in the shop is 65. Outside in the garage, it's between 30 and 40. We're coming up on the really cold part of the year, and I've tried to put the rush on some of this because on the days that I do want to paint, I would like it to be that when it's really cold out, I can be downstairs sanding. Anyway, the other tool I'm going to use extensively today, and here's the other point. A part like this is going to take me, I usually have 4-hour work sessions. Well, today I don't. I probably got 2.5 hours, realistically. I don't have my watch on. But I don't want to rush it. That's the death knell to all good finishing. My dentist used to tell me, good dental work takes time. And, you know, I have to agree with him. But anyway, I'm going to start. The easiest part, of course, is the top. Work my way onto the side, over the decals. Hopefully not go through in too many spots, but if I do, there's always touch-ups. Now, sequencing out something like this today where I know I really not going to be able to paint, but if I can get this whole part sanded in one work session, well, I'll feel like I had made good use of the time. But so far, this paint is hardened up to the point where the other thing I wanted to show, my little soft nail file, I see already I have an area that I haven't sanded yet. And so with this, if I see any imperfections, I call them moon craters. This makes it a little bit easier to do that. It's even easier to go over this than it is, and this is something, when you sand like that, or you sand with 3 or 4 fingers, everybody's got a little bit different technique. I always sand with rubber gloves. The rubber gives you a little bit of traction to the sandpaper, and your hands don't look like the Night of the Living Dead or something when you're done with a day of sanding. But anyway, and the other trick of sanding that I think works really well with, this is 1200. In the past, I've used 1500 and 1000. They all work. And you can just pick and choose. The 1200, when I put the next coat of clear on this, it'll lay out, and I think you've seen on the previous videos, it lays out as flat as can be. So I've been thinking I'll go along with this whole thing. Now, just let me show this up close. We did 2 little tests here on camera, because basically the rest of this, okay, let me show this. Since this is the base coat clear, it's going to have little dots of dirt and dust and whatever from being out in the garage. Let me wipe this dry. But where we've sanded it, now keep in mind, if we would, this is where it changes everything. People, oh, you need a body shop garage, you need a heating oven to bake the paint, you need a $1,000 spray gun. You don't need any of that if you're going to, at the very end of the job, if you're going to wet sand it, and in the end of this, and then buff it. Any imperfections are going to get lost in here. And now maybe you could find them with a microscope, I don't know, but anything you see up here, and that's normal, absolutely normal. Right now, if I quit, I could feel that stripe. Where I've sanded, you can't feel anything. So, and that's true of the whole thing, the decals, every part of this. Now it's going to be a couple hours to sand that out, and you can be the wit, you can be the one to decide if it's worth it based on what you want to do. But I know when I've done this in the past, if I bring the whole part down to flat, as soon as it's flat and I can't feel that paint job, that stripe, I'm done. Because I want to put more clear on top of that. And that final clear is going to seal that right in. And in the end, what this is going to look like when we're done with this whole part, and I always keep, I like to do this in pieces and parts. It's my own way of, see, some people would rather take the whole part, sand the whole part down, and then what happens then is you get, maybe you're doing that on a day you could paint. If you do one part at a time, you'll always have something to buff, always have something to sand, and if this part is done, I'll always have something to paint. If I get a surprise, nice painting day coming in the next couple of days. Or if we do get a painting day, of course, and Steve's available, we could work on his project. But in the meantime, I do this methodically, and I do it one step at a time, and it's very predictable. And in the end, I always have something that looks really, really nice. And I have not spent a ton of money on equipment for anything that the average hobbyist would have. That's the beauty of doing this. Now I put some of that in fast forward because what I wanted to show is, what I try to do is get the whole part just cleaned up. Now the rest I can feel with my hand. I can feel where I'm done. And if I could still feel that stripe, that's where this tool comes in very handy. And this is the kind of a thing, it's just a patience thing. And as soon as I feel that stripe going away, I know I'm done. And I do 99% of this by feel. I could actually do this in the dark, or I could do this and watch television or whatever. As soon as it disappears, and as soon as I can still feel it, go back up, change the direction of the sandpaper constantly. Don't just go in one direction, or you wind up with scratches. I always try to put a clean towel on the table. In fact, a couple of clean towels is even better to protect the part, because at this point I want to be real careful I don't scratch it, among other things. Towels are cheap, and they get real gritty looking, just throw them in the laundry. So once I get to that part, and as I've told Steve in his little time he spent here wet sanding his parts, just keep the part dry. Now I can see a little moon crater there. Oh yeah, I can see. Still need a little work on the stripe. And now this is the part, see, this is a little blob of something there. It's usually paint that sticks on the tip of the gun until the very end. Now that'll sand right out. And that's where this soft nail file comes in. Again, it would be a little bit easier if you had the $1,000 gun, if you had the climate-controlled environment and spray booths and, you know, all these things. But you don't absolutely need them. It makes it easier, but if you're a hobbyist or you're doing one restoration a year, or in my case, you're not doing it like for a for-profit thing. If you're doing this for profit, you got to cut all corners, and you got to, it's a whole different animal. Okay, so that's gone. Now we just move on to the next one. And now I'm going to spend the rest, and you can't really even record it. It just goes on infinitely until that whole part is dead flat. When that whole part, let me get a clean paper towel. If people know, and when people have shared finishing information with me, they really don't have to show me too many times what has to happen. When that whole part looks like that and I cannot feel a stripe, Then that part will be ready for the next coat of clear. And if we get one done today, I'll be thrilled. I'll be thrilled. I don't have to rush through this. And by rushing, it just takes the fun out of it too. Now the bigger parts like the fairing might take more than one day. The side fairings I would save to the very end. The tank, that'll be a one session. If I get one of these parts done per day, I'll be thrilled because they'll be ready for the clear. And then what's going to happen if we get a paintable day, and we just had a couple in the last week, a day when the wind isn't howling and maybe the temperature's up around 40, we'll get that clear right on there. And what I'm going to do today, I'm almost out of clear. I think I'm going to head down a chart and get a brand new gallon because the one I have, it will not be enough to finish this job. I've used a lot of it on Steve's job. And I don't want to be, see that's another thing, I don't want to be where I'm right near the end of the job and I run out of clear. Just not worth it. Now I did get a big chunk of that sanded. And it looks like it's coming out real nice. That's going to be really nice. And it's always good if you can divide this up like I tried to do when I get down here. Once I get everything roughly sanded, I'll go through and take one little quadrant and detail out every little speck. Move to the next one. And detail that out. Move to the next one. Maybe do all the yellow, all the stripe, do each one of the boxes. If you divide the part up into different segments, it's just more convenient. And what I'm going to do now, since I've got the base sanding done here, I'm going to take a little break, head out and get that paint, and have another cup of coffee. It's a lot of work doing this, but you can spread it out over several sessions. But the bottom line is when it's done forever. We're on our way down to the world famous, absolutely world famous, Gavin's Paint Supply in Patterson. World famous. Been buying paint here for years. What a place. Need a big smile. Hold that board up. You mix that paint. It doesn't match worth a shit. And I noticed the price. You guys are charging 30% more than Sears Roebuck. Anyway, listen, Dennis talked me into trying this. This is 8121 replacement?
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. And we got another gallon of this. I'm going to charge Steve for this gallon.
Yes. Speed clear.
Turbo Steve was here and he said you guys screwed him over good. But I said, don't worry, they screw everybody.
Yeah, right.
So as we get these parts sanded out one by one, we'll have a nice fresh gallon and we'll be able to see if this really is a replacement. Well, we'll find out. 4CR is good quality stuff. We've been using their Bondo and among other things, and we always, whenever I'm at Gavin's, the world famous Gavin's, they always talk me into spending my paycheck. And Dennis, the guy we just interviewed with no results, anyway, he's the one that mixed the world famous Yama Yellow. Well, every time I look at that out in the sunlight, it could make you crazy how good that looks. Now, one of the things I do, and it was Bob Brookins that gave me the information, of course, and he's a professional, and it was to keep the hardener, and we got for all three brands of clear that we've used over the years, in the refrigerator. Prolongs the life of the hardener. Now, we're going to find out, because I have, here's what's left of the 8021, and this is the replacement. We're going to find out very soon when we go to buff apart in the next couple days if that really is a good replacement. Knowing 4CR, all their stuff seems to be top level stuff though. So back to work here after a nice little ride up to Gavin's. I always try to answer, because I've been trying to help people for many years learn how to do good finishing, both model planes, which of course there's over 1,000 videos out there that deal with model airplanes and finishing. But on a motorcycle, what's very different about a motorcycle, you can put more clear on. You're not limited by weight. But the good news is, with a motorcycle, it's a lot easier. It's about 1/10 the amount of work to paint a motorcycle as a model plane. But you still have to know the basic rules. The rules of engagement are always the same. And there's some that never change. And this is one of them right now. I'm sanding in this direction. If I sand in this direction, I've made like a 90-degree change in motion. if I sand here, I've gone in 4 different emotions. From 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, well, however I change up. And one of the things I do that a lot of people that have been watching a lot of these videos over, we've been doing this since '87, by the way. So making videos, '87, think about that. I had the first video camera in '87. That's pretty cool. Anyway, and thank you Ken Budensink for, I never even bought the first camera, he loaned it to me. So we've been able to document some fun stuff, but we've been able to share information that I don't know. It might be out on YouTube, it might be available in some other way, but we've been able to do it in what I think is a fun way. Because I think, and this is really an important concept, I think anybody who paints, a painter is like a cook. There's cooks that they're real good at making Italian food, pizza, whatever. And then there's people that deal with trying to do vegan food, keep it healthy. People that do fish. And the thing is, they're all good. You just got to decide what you want to eat. Now, people that do commercial finishing of cars and stuff, like you see on Bitchin' Rides and stuff, these are big high dollar items, and they have those $1,000 spray guns and whatever. What I've tried to do is turn it into an everyman's pastime that you can do on a budget, you can do with limited time, and still know all the tricks of the trade that, to be honest, a lot of these tricks are kind of secret stuff that people don't really want to share. They want you to think they're magicians or something. And over the years, the people that have been helpful to me, Bob Brooken's another one that's been very helpful over the years. Custom car painter, Walt Prey. What I've tried to do is many times is to credit the people that have helped me. And it just seems to be that it's kind of a lost art, because I don't picture a lot of young people putting down their cell phones and wanting to learn how to paint. I mean, they're into wrapping things. What does that tell you? You just wrap it. So, and maybe they're right, who knows. But I know this is a lost art. If you happen to enjoy it, and if you get some amount of satisfaction out of doing your own work on a budget and in limited time, I think the information you need how to do is all on this channel. Now, the other thing is I'm going to try to finish sanding this part out today. But this is all I'm going to get to do, because I ate up a big chunk of the time hanging out with Dennis over there. And he's quite a good guy. He mixed the Yama Yellow. Let's call it Dennis Yama Yellow. And one of the things, when I get to the end of sanding out a part, I pretty much got everything roughed in. Then I take one little section at a time, like this. I'll candle it. Remember, I showed what candling was on a previous video. Hold it up to the light, look for a shiny spot, and you'll see if there's any moon craters, any little divots, any little imperfections. Now, I want to do one box at a time, including the paint lines. So again, if you can break up a part, even if it's all one color, you can just do it just by eye and break it up. The one thing I found, and it was a giant improvement in the quality of the work I was doing at one time, I tried to sand the whole part just going like I was a helicopter. Well, now I try to segment it out into little, picture the United States. I try to sand Texas first, then I try to sand Oklahoma, and then Kansas. But I don't just go all across the United States, because I want to be really fussy. And if this is the only thing I get done today, well, that's fine and dandy, because it's not a paintable day. Even if I finish this, I can't paint today. That's the downside of this. But by being fussy, in the end, you always win. It's a bumpy road, but it gets you where you want to go. And it's this thing of just changing direction with the sandpaper. Worked pretty well for me. I've heard other people say before you buff. Now, this is coming from people that really do know this stuff, but they don't share it. That's the problem. Is when you're sanding before buffing, you should always do it in squares. It makes the buffing easier. Well, we've never had a big deal buffing things. It seems like no matter how I sand it, the buffing comes out okay. So now, but the point of this is another good piece of information. Now that one square, I can candle it, I can look at it, Now I'll just do it off camera because I'll move to this square, to this square. I'll do this yellow part, do this bottom in 2 pieces, maybe 3 pieces. But when I'm all done, I want my bare hands to go over it, and anything I feel, or if I candle it, anything that shines, then I know I'm not done. Now as I'm doing this, you can see this is a little shiny spot I haven't got to yet. This is totally flat, flat as a pancake. You can't feel that paint line at all. But another thing, you don't want to go any further than that. I don't want to go down it. I want it to be flat because we're going to obviously put more clear on it. So I know there's a little spot I have to sand, and it's this little detail sanding. If you pick away at it long enough, by the time you put that next coat of clear on, every time you do this, the part gets nicer and nicer and nicer. And then at some part, at the end of the job, you have something that's just as good as you can possibly make it. And that's the whole purpose of the videos that we send out. So I think we're ready now. The only thing that's left to do on this part is wait for some weather that we can shoot clear. Now the pieces that are hanging up by the heating vent, every day they hang by that heating vent, they'll be easier and easier to do. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and of course we'll save the bigger parts for last. And thanks for watching.